Welcome to the Pathways to Success. I'm Julian Placino, recruiting professional turned success speaker, show host, and media entrepreneur. This show is dedicated to helping you find your unique pathway to success by having conversations that educate, inspire, and transform. Together, we'll interview some of the world's greatest leaders and uncover their secrets to success. Thanks for tuning in, and on to the show. Welcome to episode 182 of the Pathways to Success. I'm Julian Placino, a recruiting professional turned success speaker, show host, and media entrepreneur. And on this show, we help you find your pathway to success by having conversations that educate, inspire, and transform with the world's greatest leaders. And we have an excellent show for you today. Today's episode is brought to you by City Central. City Central offers innovative workspaces for businesses to thrive. City Central offers everything from private offices and co-working space to virtual offices and meeting rooms. City Central has 5 convenient locations in the DFW Metroplex, including North Dallas, Plano, Uptown, Richardson, and Fort Worth. If you use the promo code PATHWAYS, you'll get 50% off your first 3 months. I've been officing out of North Dallas since I started my entrepreneurial journey, and being part of this community has absolutely been instrumental to the growth of my business. So if you're looking for an innovative workspace for your business to thrive, visit citycentral.com for a free tour and use the promo code PATHWAYS to get 50% off your first 3 months. So before we get kicked off, I have to give a huge shout out to everyone here in the live stream. So shout out to Kenneth Alamo for joining us, to Rosie, my better half, my fiance. Thank you, my love, for tuning in. And as a matter of fact, if you're just chiming in now, please do tell us your name into the chat and where you're coming from. And ultimately, the show is for you to help you find your pathway to success. And please do engage with us in the chat as you have questions that come up. So before we introduce our guest, I want to play for you a short video of him in action.
To show you who you are born to be, to understand that you're a leader, to understand that you're not a follower, to understand that, man, the love that you're seeking from a woman, from a boy, from the world, it got to start with you. That's a thing that's of the mind. That's when the real journey starts, man. When you got to build in the rain, man, you got to build in the rain. It gonna cost you something, man. When a man don't know why he is here, he don't have a purpose within himself. This world is gonna try you. How much do you believe, King? What do you think your mind is doing to your kingdom if you don't change the algorithm to your experiences?
Jay Barnett is a former professional athlete turned mental health expert, best-selling author, and of course, an incredible motivational speaker. Jay Barnett, welcome back to the Pathways to Success, man. How are you?
Man, well, man, I can't complain, man. All things considered, you know, healthy, and everything has been great, man. And just looking forward to what 2021 has to hold. You know, after coming out of 2020, man. But all is well, brother, and I'm grateful to be back, man, on the Pathways to Success, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been thinking about our own journey. This is our
right?
3rd collaboration.
I know, man.
I started the show out of my employer's office. You did my first live show at the Network Bar, and now we're here at Real News PR. So, man, it's been amazing to see your growth, and I appreciate you being part of my own pathway to success.
But man, it's been beautiful, Julian, to see your growth, and I'm just blessed to be a part of it, man. I really, you know, value you as a person and the friendship, but man, your energy and just your enthusiasm, everything that you bring to what you do, man, is so infectious. And so, I mean, kudos to you, man. So I'm just always, you know, every time we catch up, man, it's always just enlightening and encouraging, man. So this is just beautiful, just to see where you started. But I think that's also great for people to see that you can have that small beginning and just allow that thing to grow, and that's what you've done, man. So it's awesome to see, brother.
I greatly appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Jay, I have a lot of people here tuning in. So hello to Trice D, to Nico Placino, to Billy Placino. Thank you all for joining us here on the live stream. So So Jay, I want to first give us some thoughts. Recap 2020 for us. I mean, you're an expert when it comes to mental health. It's been a crazy year for all of us. What are some thoughts of recapping 2020?
Man, to really recap 2020, man, you really have to. It's almost as you have to go back into a state where it's just. I'm sure there was denial for most people, just really trying to figure out, like, this can't be happening. To really recap it, I think about just the mental stress that we had to endure as a country, not only as we are going through a pandemic, but we're experiencing all of these different social injustice issues. And so, like, you can't talk about 2020 and not mention Kobe Bryant passing and his daughter and all the other members on the flight. You can't talk about 2020 and not discuss George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, along with the coronavirus. And so, to recap 2020, man, it's so much to unpack, because I think for the first time that everyone really had to look within themselves when we had to sit at home, not knowing what was going to happen, not knowing the length of time that we would be at home, not knowing the process, not knowing how this thing would end. I remember talking to a friend of mine when the pandemic first happened, and I think it was March when it started, and everyone is sitting at home, and I think she says, Jay, she's like, man, somebody said this thing is going to last to like July. And I'm like, no way, man. I'm like, man, this is not going to last to July.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking like, no, this will be over in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And, I remember the 4th of July, and it's just kind of like, yo, it's still here. So I think psychologically, man, it was a lot on everyone. I don't care what race you're from, what your financial or social economic status was. It was just a lot mentally, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you extract any positive meaning from everything that happened in 2020 to launch us into 2021?
Yeah, yes, because I think having the ability to sit at home and having the time to process where you were in your life is a great place to extract from, because now you can evaluate and assess from a place of almost like a place of just where there's this solitude that you had by sitting with yourself. Marriages. There were some marriages that crumbled, but then again, there were some marriages that grew stronger. Families, some families kind of fell apart because of the distance and because of not being able to visit one another. But then there were some families that actually came together because Zoom allowed you to really create that experience to where you weren't there physically, but we can see each other. And now we begin to value life from a different perspective. So it's so many different lessons that we can take from 2020, because 2020 taught you a lot about humanity.
Yeah.
Because it didn't matter what race you were, we all was experiencing this pandemic, and we still are. Another thing that you could take from it is the appreciation of life.
Yeah.
All of the lives that were lost from the pandemic, and going through that process. And there are some that that contracted the virus and they were able to recover, and then there were some that have continued to have these issues after that the virus has happened. So I think it's the appreciation of life, just the process of what you are valuing time, and then also understanding that we are human beings.
Yeah.
And I think the majority of the time, many of us are operating from a machinery perspective. Is either you're on this path to get to success, you're on this road to achieve everything, that you actually forget about living. And what 2020 showed all of us is that at some point you're going to have to stop and really live. And when I'm talking about living, I'm not talking about taking trips. I'm not talking about, eating great food. Living means to really embrace life for what it is, not for what you want it to be, but for what it is, and have an appreciation for that.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. A lot more folks here chiming in onto the live stream here for you, Jay. My Mind Matters says hello. So thank you and welcome to the show. So, Jay, the show is the pathways to success. And I think one of the best ways to sort of inspire leadership and professional development is to showcase examples of people who've done great things. You, of course, are no exception. and to learn their stories so we can find the breadcrumbs of what have you done to create these results in your life, right?
Yeah.
So there's so many facets to who you are.
Yes.
So the best-selling author, mental health expert, incredible speaker, and of course, NFL athlete. If you were to tell the story of Jay before NFL, can you point to a formative experience, perhaps in your youth, and be like, this is where my story started?
Yeah. Oh,
Tell
yeah,
us about
absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Whew. Man, you're making me go back. So my story started, man, as a 13-year-old kid in Mississippi, and standing in between my mother and father. They have already agreed that they were divorcing, and my mother is standing in front of the U-Haul truck where she's loaded all of our stuff to transition to Texas, and my father is standing there, and standing in between them, and really having this thought like, man, my family is not going to be a family anymore. My dad is a pastor. I come from a very spiritual background, and my family was spiritual leaders in the community. And that reality of watching a family break up and separate was something that I saw on TV that I thought that would never happen to me. And at that time, I'm having to accept the reality that my father would no longer be in my life from a physical at-home experience. And now what I saw on TV is now what I'm having to live from the characters when I saw certain shows where kids were crying and they were wanting their dad, and it's just kind of like they didn't want to break up. So my story started there because I now don't have a model of who I want to become. What do I want to do? Because all of my life, from the time that I, of course, come into the knowledge of my parents and who my dad was, and you know, he was an awesome football player, he was an awesome speaker, a powerful preacher, and so those are all the things that I wanted to become. And now having to deal with the reality that this model is not going to be there. So who am I going to become? And at the same time, I'm dealing with the pressure of I gotta be this strong support system to my sisters and to my mother at 13 years old. So when we get in the truck and leave Mississippi and drive to Texas, the kid that got in the truck in Mississippi was not the kid that got out in Texas. And my story started there because now I had to create another type of mentality. Because is what we call that in the mental capacity or mental health, we call it a maladaptive, personality, right? So I had to create, because now I'm having to create a image that's going to be adapted to my new environment. Because we don't know where we're moving to. We move with some friends, my mom's family friends, and so going to a new high school, and I don't know who I am because that model left. And that's when my depression started. That's when a lot of my issues started, and I've been very transparent. Like, I was a cutter. I used to cut on my wrists and my forearms all the time. And kids or individuals who inflict self-harm are usually trying to numb internal pain by causing external pain. So it's this swap for external, internal, because it's the numbing agent that don't hurt. I mean, I would cut on myself like it was nothing, like that don't hurt. And it didn't hurt because I've trained my brain to shut off this part, right? Because I was trying to compensate for what I was feeling internally. Yeah. And man, and that's when a lot of my stuff started, man, so yeah.
Wow. Jay, what's the link? What's the link to that pain that you experienced, or can you link it to the results you've been able to create? You said that's where you started, right?
Right.
So what was that influence to make you the hyperachiever you are today?
I think the link is that I've always been resilient. And I didn't realize at the time how emotionally resilient I was, having experienced a lot of the things that I experienced at a young age, and then going through physical abuse with my stepfather, and going through the depression, and I had these manic depressive state to where I would have highs, and then my lows were very low, and going through college and battling depression, and I mean it was like I was always at this point of just like, man, I can't go on any further. And I think for me, what I gathered and what I took from football was the ability to actually lean into these times and not be overtaken by it, but to really look for a way to see myself out of it. Yeah. And that's challenging for most people, because for some people, their issues is the end all be all. And the link for me has always to be resilient so I can recover.
Yeah.
And for most people, there is a tendency to be resilient, but they lack the ability to actually have to be able to recover. And so for me, it's like, you got to be able to bounce back. Yeah. And how you bounce back is going to determine how you're able to move forward. And so that's what I've been able to kind of link to my success, is being resilient. Because if you're going to do what we're doing, if you're going to build people and you're going to change lives, you have got to be emotionally resilient, because there's going to be times where you don't feel like it. You're going to be times where you're not compensated for your value. There's going to be times where you're going to feel like you're giving more than you're receiving. And especially if you are not in a space to where you have been in a space to where you have allowed someone to really connect to you, to really give back everything that you're pouring out. And it takes a great deal of resilience to not only to allow your story to go through its process, but then to use your story to help others. Yeah. And that's my journey now, is I want to help others heal. Because if you can heal your internal wounds, if you can heal from your trauma, if you can heal from all of the psychological and all of the mental, the emotional, and the physical abuse, that's your pathway to success.
Your pathway to success, yeah.
You know?
I love that. I love that. I want to go back to the live stream, and I want to give a shout out to Queen. I'm sorry for mispronouncing your name. Queen, thank you for joining us. And if you haven't already, please do type your name into the chat and tell us where you're coming from. We want to engage with you. We want to answer your questions. So feel free to ask that at any time. So Jay, how many people who try out to be in the NFL, how many do you think actually get there? What percentage?
Man, probably less than 1%.
Less than 1%.
Yeah.
You were part of that 1%.
So I was part of the percent that got the opportunity, but then I wasn't part of the percent that was able to really continue on. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, because it's a process, and so you're going through the process. Like it was multiple trials, and then I had the opportunity and got in there, and then they made a change of decision toward the last minute. And really coming out of there, it was just like, dang. And then I transitioned. So when I left, and the opportunity with the Packers didn't work out, so I went down to Arena League. And so I'm in the Arena Leagues, and Arena probably, man, I was probably on a team with 10 or 15 guys that had my same story, right? Yeah. We were all free agents trying to go back up. And everybody had the opportunity, and everyone had this this moment that we were all trying to recapture, because that's what it is. And as a man, you really don't want to let it go, because for most of us, especially for black males, sports have really been a rites of passage. Yeah. It's really been a place for us to grow and to evolve and to develop into men. And for me, that was my really coping space. So it was like, man, when I was on that field, it was just like nothing else mattered. And I think when that came to an end, it was really like, man, how am I going to cope with life right now? Yeah. And that's what happened with a lot of guys, man, in sports, is that when it ends, it's like who am I? And what my journey did was it allowed me to discover that I was more than just an athlete, more than just a football player, that football was what I did, but it wasn't who I was. Yeah. And that's really the game changer in understanding who you are, because the moment that you can identify with who you are, you can identify with who you are not. And that allows you to discover your pathway, again, back to success. And that success is not money. Yeah. Success is not the big house. Success is arriving at the place that you set out in front for your path.
I love that. I love that. Big shout out to Justin McCollum, my good friend Justin. He is certainly one of the best salespeople I've ever met. Next, of course, my fiance Rosie, who's also tuning in here. Thank you for joining the show here. Also, Brave Assets. Thank you for tuning into the live stream. We appreciate you coming on to the show. So Jay, from the NFL to speaker, author, mental health expert, what was that transition?
Man, so man, you gotta be asking these deep questions. No, it's good. So for me, man, so I leave Alabama. I'm playing arena ball in Alabama. I get cut after the 5th game, and I got cut. And this is how crucial ball is, especially when you get up to that level. So I got cut. I had a bad game. I fumbled, and I could not get out of my head, and like the rest of the game was just horrible. At that time, what I possessed today mentally would have really taken me back to the league had I had the mental capacity to bounce back from that. So I returned back home to Houston after that, and I think I went to another team, and then I had some more offers, and my agent says, hey, listen, there's an opportunity in Canada. And really, man, by that time, I was really just burnt out, because at this time, I was about, 25, 26 years old. And I'm just like, dude, I'm just tired of this back and forth journey with football. And if anybody's watching, they know how this is, man, when it's like you training all day, around the clock, man. And it was just like so tiring. And fast forward, I wanted to stay connected to the game. So I created a business, and I started working with pro athletes. Cool. So I started training athletes. I met my best friend at the time, Spencer Johnson, who had played 4 years in Minnesota. And so he was like, I said, yo, man, I got some work for you, bro. So he came over and trained with me for the summer. He went back, had his best season, and got his biggest contract. And by that time, like, I kind of grew my business to where I had, Namak Sue came down, and I had a lot of different guys that I was working with. So I was growing in that aspect. So I did that about 5 years. And what I learned in that, I had all of these kids who had got scholarships, and I was training girls, I was training boys, football, soccer, hockey, you name it, I was on it. And my company was called Beast Mode Incorporated. And what I did that was different in my thing was that I was focusing more on the mental production rather than the physical production. Because if you can produce mentally, your body will follow. Yeah. So one day, man, God gave me this vision on transitioning from the sports into the mental side of it. Literally, he gave me this program, mentoring program. It was an emotional recovery program that I took into foster homes and group homes and foster care. And that birthed the books. Wow. Because what I was doing was everything, because I've always loved teenagers. I work with teenagers in my dad's church. So you give me a kid from like 10 to like 18, oh man, that's my sweet spot. And I love working with these kids, and they were really embracing it, because what they were learning was that, man, my mind is so much stronger than what I'm actually using it for. Yeah. And they were now able to move beyond their circumstances. And I'm working with girls that have been molested, boys that have been abused, kids who parents gave them away. And that grew into me writing books about the experiences and then tying it into my story, because every time I saw a kid that I was working with, I saw me. Wow. Mm-hmm. And what prompted me to continue that work is that, man, if I can give this kid what I needed then, man, this is going to help them so much further down the road. And one day, I'm at one of the group homes that I work at, and the young lady who was the director, she says, man, your work is like a therapist. She was like, man, like, you're like, she's like, your group work that you do, yeah. I'm doing heavy work, man. I'm working with 15 to 30 girls, all walks of life, all races. They're coming in by the droves. And what happened was the staff was like, man, can he work with us? We got some stuff we need to unpack. And she said, you ever thought about being a therapist? And I was like, I said, man, I thought about being a counselor, yeah. But I'm like, not my thing. Sure enough, man, I researched it, applied for grad school, got accepted, and I was like, oh snap! like I didn't think they was gonna accept me. I'm like, I'm 33 years old. I don't want to go back to grad school. And so fast forward, man, from the first day of class, I never forget this. Fundamentals of family therapy. From the first class I took, Julian, I knew this is where I was supposed to be.
Love it.
And it was fun, man. It was awesome because I was learning about my own family dynamics. Mm-hmm. I was learning about myself, and I started learning about depression. I started learning about anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar, all of these different disorders. And my professors are like, dude, like, because they didn't know I had books until one of them was like, hey, I came across a video, man, like you, because at this time, like, I'd already written 2 books. And my papers were so in depth. And my professor says, why is your paper so deep? I said, because all of this is telling me about me. So when I'm writing on certain cases and certain vignettes, I am looking at my family. So I'm looking at Jay, I'm looking at little Jay, I'm looking at the 20-year-old Jay, and I'm looking at the 30-year-old Jay. You know what I'm saying? I'm looking at the 30-year-old Jay who had a second suicide attempt and who survived a drug overdose. So at 33, my perspective on myself now has shifted. And I'm like, man, now this is making sense. And I think the beautiful thing about what I do now, man, as a therapist is helping people to connect the dots, to unlock the trauma or to unlock the experience. Because, again, if you unlock these things that we often tuck away, or that the things that we hide with success, because a lot of us would do that, because that's what I was trying to do with football. Like, if I make it in the league, I ain't got to deal with this daddy issues, because I got money. I'm validated because I'm playing ball. I'm validated because people know me. I'm validated because I've arrived at this place that they said, once you get here, all of your problems go away, which is a complete lie. And I think the beauty of it is now is how to create internal success. And that's is what I'm on right now, man, is healing people for internal success, which helps to push you forward for the external success.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And that was your pathway to success.
And that was my pathway to success,
That was your pathway
man.
to success. So Jay, we're going to take a quick commercial break to hear from our sponsors. Justin and also Sherry, I see your questions in the chat. We'll answer it when we return.
You want to transition out of your career and do something tech-related, CodeUp is the place for you. When I came to CodeUp, I was actually working at a chain hair salon. It was just starting not to be for me anymore. My goals were to never work a weekend ever again, to have full health care and benefits, and to just have more time with my son. And now I've met all of those goals. I don't have any regrets. I just regret not coming sooner when I saw those billboards when I was driving down the highway.
And we're back, more with Jay Barnett and specifically his keys to success. So during the commercial break, we have a few people chiming in here. So Mark Ibarra, how's it going, man? We connected on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining the show. Also, Kenneth Alamo, he says, inspirational story, Jay Barnett. So thank you for that. And we'll go ahead and start taking some questions. And this one here is from It's from Queen. Queen reached out to me on Instagram, and she said this. She first wanted to share a quote with everyone here on the show, and the quote is this: "Eyes are useless when the mind is blind." She follows saying, "I think when we ponder on success, we have a picture view, but many lack that mental picture." So her question is, Jay, can you speak to the mental blindness of success? Queen, thank you for that question.
Yeah, I think so. It's going back to the mental blindness of success is really, it's how you're looking at success.
Yeah.
And we live in a very superficial and a very glamorized world that says success is the car, success is the house. It's all things that are superficial. So the mental blindness of it is that, no, being able to identify with some things in you that may cause you to be a little off, that's success, which is self-awareness.
Yeah.
So to be able to have that emotional intelligence where you can identify with your emotions while also acknowledging someone else's emotional state as well. And so I think the mental blindness is that how we're seeing things. And to really see clearly, you have to have an open mind that, okay, what is success really? And I think most of us, once we readjust our lens to how we're looking at success, it would help us to better define what success is. Because if you made it out of 2020, you were successful. Mm-hmm. If you came out of 2020 alive, you were successful.
Yeah.
Meaning that your life was spared, whether you lived through the virus and you had it and you lived through it, you were successful. So for every one of us that are here today, and we made it through 2020, we're already successful.
Yeah.
And so it's really just, man, really just changing the lens, how we look at things. And because how you look at things are going to impact your interpretation of a thing. So if I'm looking from a deeper lens that, do you have a great life because of how you post, or do you have a great life because of how you live?
Yeah.
And I think that's how you really really address the mental blindness that, you know, the majority of us have too, especially in this day and age.
So having helped hundreds from your practice, right? What is the most empowering way that we can all reframe regarding success? And again, piggybacking on Queen's question.
I think how we can really work to reframe is, for one, connecting to what your definition of success is for you. Mm-hmm. I think many times people's definition of success is from other perspectives, other walks of life, from maybe an article you read where a guy says, well, you know, in the past 6 months, I did $500,000 and I created this sales funnel, and this sales funnel, you know, I charged $50 here, and he's telling you that he was successful. But then again, was it really success if your marriage is failing? Mm. Was it really success if your kids don't have the opportunity to spend daddy time or to spend mommy time? Was it successful if your bank account is full but your health is failing? Because you're so under stress, so you're under so much stress and duress because you're trying to make a dollar. And so I think to reframe it is to reframe from, what do you value?
Yeah, what do you value?
What do you value?
And getting clear on what that is.
And getting clear on what that is, because what I value is going to be what I look as success to be. And if I value peace, if I value having the balance of time with my wife, with my kids, and having the work-life balance, that's successful, mm-hmm. right? Success is not that I make $150,000 a year, because one of the worst things that I think that I see people do is when you introduce somebody or you introduce yourself and they tell you what they do. To me, that is an indicator that, for one, you're overcompensating for something.
Yeah.
Because what you do is not who you are.
What you do is not who you are.
It's not who you. It's not who you are.
Yeah.
And so I think that when you're holding to what you do to give you this definition of success, that's a dangerous place.
Yeah.
Because, like for myself, what happens when you can no longer do that?
Yeah.
And I at one time bought into that lie when football closed, and it was like, yo, we going with this other dude, I felt like a failure.
Yeah.
And my story is, and I'll tell this, is that when I felt like a failure, I was like, I'm out of here. I attempted suicide. So I'm telling people, like, that story that they sell us, that if this doesn't happen, you're not successful, right? It's a complete lie.
Yeah.
Because looking back on it, the Packers never told me I couldn't play football. They just said they was going a different direction.
Yeah.
But at that time, I only heard that you can't play. That's not what they said. But I'm going to show you how it was connected to something. When they closed the door, it felt as if my dad was closing the door all over again. And that's how deep things are when we don't identify it, and that's when we'll start holding on. Because if you are thinking success is that, man, I'm making $100,000 because my parents only made $45,000, $50,000. But yeah, your parents probably had more peace than you had.
Yeah.
Because the $100,000 for you is really overcompensating for the lack of work that you won't do internally, so you focus on the external factors of it.
Yeah.
So it's deep stuff, man.
That is deep stuff. Queen, you got to give a thumbs up in the chat if that answer was suffice for you. Thank you very much for that question. So yeah, so we got about 15 minutes left of the show. I want to crank through as many of these questions. It's coming through crazy in the chat, okay?
Yeah.
This question is from my good friend Justin McCollum. He says, Jay, how has faith played into your success in life?
Oh man, faith has has a huge place in my life, because I'll tell you this, Justin, not a lot of people live through a drug overdose. Not a lot of people live through the things that I've done to myself physically, struggling with depression and my mental health issues. Not a lot of people live through those things, man. And when I lived through this second suicide attempt, man, it was an indicator that God had a purpose for me that I didn't know anything about. And my faith has played such a huge role, because once I connected to the purpose, I was able to connect with my life. Because purpose indicates that you have life. Yeah. And your life, that the mere fact that you have life is associated with that God has you here for a reason. And many of us are still searching and still looking, because when you're thinking about people who have taken their lives and people who have attempted, much of the issue is that they feel that their life is purposeless. Yeah. Because see, when you have purpose, you have something to live for. And when I grabbed the hope to that thing, I said, Jay, you got something to live for. And it was one of those things where I really felt like God arrested me and said, listen, if you don't get it together, like, because I was on this path, man, where I would be good for a little bit and then I would go right back into the tank. And I can remember a voice saying, hey, listen, if this happened again, you're going to succeed. Because at this time, it was just like I was just looking for a way out, because I was just looking for, man, how do I end the pain of the memories? Because the memories and the PTSD and all of the trauma that I experienced, like none of it would go away. And so I was trying to end the pain rather than end my life. But as you know, when this happens to people and they end their life, it's one of those things, man, where it's such a tragedy, because if you get beyond the pain, you can experience more life. Yeah. And that's what I was able to do. And so that's why faith plays a big part. And that's why, man, I love my purpose. I love what I do, because I'm like, yo, I know I'm not supposed to be here. Yeah. But then again, I know I am supposed to be here, you know, because I am. And so I'm working in my purpose. So my faith has really played a huge role, because my word to God was literally like, yo, whatever you need from me, man, yeah. I'm committed. Yeah. Because I realized that I was trying to take a life that wasn't mine. Mm-hmm. And when we can identify that this life is not ours and this life is for something bigger than us, then it allows you to give of yourself. And that's
love it.
So I hope that answers his question.
I got goosebumps. Justin, give us a thumbs up if that answer was good for you. It was great for me. Thank you for the question, Justin. This question is from Sherry Krause. She says, what is something you recommend for those who need to start becoming more resilient? How do they get to that point?
To start, for those who want to start becoming resilient, one of the things that I would suggest, and a very small thing, is sit down and write out things that you're willing to fight for. Write out things that you're willing to fight for. And if you don't write them out, identify what are those things that you're willing to fight for. Because once I identify something that I'm willing to fight for, it now gives me reason to push. Because that's what resilient is a reason to push forward, to go through, to withstand, to endure. And once I can identify with something that gives me a reason to live, a reason to grow, and a reason to continue, for Sherry, it may be your kids. It may be your spouse. It may be your family. Matter of fact, it may be that one thing in your childhood that you're wanting to correct through a connection with someone else. Because once I identify with that thing, it now gives me the courage. And that courage then translate into the energy and the will. And that's where you can start in order to become resilient.
So Jay, let me ask you this. 2020 was a killer year for a lot of people. You know, people are out of work, they've been laid off, businesses shut down, you name it. So if someone out there is watching and experiencing depression and doesn't have a meaning or a purpose or whatnot, and they're struggling to find it, what's the first step they need to take to start to connect with whatever that is for them?
The first step, that's a great question, Julian. The first step is to identify that your life has meaning. And what I mean by that is that you made it. You think about, let's really dig into how many people died from the virus.
Right.
How many people died altogether that was non-virus issues? How many people died by way of an officer, by way of accident, by way of an incident, by way of a shooting, a killing, a murder, or kidney failure, cancer, a terminal disease? If you are here today, January 21st, 2021, and you're alive, you can start there, that your life has meaning because you're still here. If you're still here, there's still work to be done. If you're still here, that means that you still have a purpose. Maybe you haven't identified with that purpose and maybe you haven't figured it out, but to be here is an indicator that there's something here for you to do. And if you can really dig and really grab a hold to that, that gives you the energy, that gives you the push, going back to that resilience, right? That gives you the resiliency to push that, man, if I can just get to this, if I can just get to that point, if I can just get to the end of the week to keep pushing, right? How do I redefine my life now that I've lost a job? Because I want to let the people know this, just because you lost a job doesn't mean that you lose yourself. Because you are not the job. They didn't bring the job to you, you brought you to the job. So the same job that you lost, whatever you have in you that gave you the ability to perform that job, you have the ability to go, not so much to just find, but to discover what the next is for you. Maybe the next is entrepreneurship. Maybe the next is back to school. Maybe the next is a different career path. So it's really digging in to say, man, I have the intangibles. And that gives me what I need to figure out what my next is.
I love it.
Yeah.
It really sounds like, Jay, a lot of this stuff is, first off, reflection, like
Yes.
discovering what your values are, what's important to you, what really lights you up, and I absolutely believe that. And I think that's a great actionable first step for anyone in the audience who may be experiencing anxiety or depression because of whatever happened last year. So I want to move to the next step, right? So let's go to the next level. Let's say that you're past that now. Let's say that the outcome you want to create is being primed for success. Give us one or two strategies that everyone here watching can implement in terms of mental health. What is a mental health strategy that people can implement to prime them for success?
One of the first things is, you talked about reflection. One of the first things that primes you for success is really doing the self-check-ins, the self-awareness. One of the things that when you look at people who are extremely successful, they're very aware. They're aware of their surroundings. They're aware of their feelings. They're aware of their emotions, because it really takes a high level of emotional intelligence and emotional intellect to be successful on any level. You have to be aware of where you want to go. You have to be aware of what you possess. You have to be aware of what you have. You have to be aware of what you don't have, so you can attract, or so you can reach out and bring those things, those persons, those resources, and those different things. And it's really, you have to be self-aware.
Yeah.
You have to be able to connect with yourself. And the next thing is create healthy routines. Successful people have healthy routines. And what I mean about healthy routines is a healthy routines. How do you start your day? How do you purpose your day? Meaning, how intentional are you about how you get started? How do you prep? Like, is that sitting silent? Is that gathering your thoughts? Is that eating a healthy breakfast? Is that working out? What is that for you? Because how you start, it's not necessarily of how you're going to finish, but it's how you're going to navigate.
Yeah.
Because if I'm navigating from a healthy state, it allows me to be able to respond to uncertainties rather than react.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to be successful, you must understand that a response is warranted before reaction.
A response is warranted before a reaction.
Because reactionary is no thought. It's a knee-jerk experience.
It's just yeah, right.
Right? Response is a process of thought. And if you're going to be successful, you have to be very strategic even in your thought process. Because to really move and progress into success from different fields and different genres and different arenas, even in relationships, I have to process. So I'll give an example. I have to be able to, if something happens throughout the course of my day, I have to process how I'm going to respond to what happened. So to be able to respond means that I have to think that my action plays a role, my energy plays a role, which is your mood, which is your demeanor, your body language. All of those things plays a factor. And now I'm able to gather myself to respond, because a response would determine the outcome. And anyone would tell you that in a field to be successful. Because and here's what I mean by that, people, if I can just be even more transparent, is you can't say what you want to say. There are sometimes you have to guard this. And if you're trying to achieve success, you have to use wisdom, right? And not to make this into church, but I love Proverbs when he talked about wisdom is the principal thing, and all you're getting is get an understanding.
Yeah.
In everything, have clarity and understanding, because that's critical for success.
Wow. Powerful. Jay, there are so many questions in the chat right now, but we're running out of time, okay?
Yeah.
So would you give my audience permission to reach out to you after the show on social media if there's questions that they can? Okay, awesome.
Yes.
So please, everyone here, we're not going to be able to get to everyone's questions, but Jay has given you approval to reach out to him on social media. I'm going to take one more. This is from Billy Placino. She's my sister.
Okay.
And she's asking this: for those who feel lost or lack direction in life, how do you help others discover their purpose? So maybe, is there an exercise that you help your clients with that our audience can implement to start to begin to connect them to their purpose?
I always go back to childhood experiences.
Yeah.
For a lot of people that I coach and they're trying to find their purpose, I always go back to the child in you. What did the child in you, or what did the kid in you like to do? Because believe it or not, our purpose are often connected to the kid in us.
Yeah, I believe that.
I'm telling you, man, at 9 years old, I was in my dad's church doing call to worship. I was praying, I was leading service. I would conduct the entire service at 10, 11 years old, and my dad would come out and preach. That's what I was doing, and I enjoyed it. And on youth days, my dad would let me speak to the young people, right? So I never forget, in Memphis, Tennessee, I spoke at this youth conference. I was 10 years old. It was 200 kids out there. And they were all coming out to see this young kid preach, teach, or whatever you want to call it, talk to them, right? They were all standing around me, and they was just like this. And I remember the kids was like, man, you're not scared? You're not shy? And I was like, nah. I'm like, it was just what I did. It wasn't, my parents didn't push me. And I knew that's what I was called to do. I knew I was called to young people.
Yeah.
So at 31, 32, God brought that back to me. Remember what the little boy was doing. So to Billy is that always bring someone, or you can, not always, but you can bring someone back to what was the childhood experience, or what did they enjoy, what did they do? Because purpose is not necessarily that you have to do it every day in your career. Because there are some people who have 9 to 5, right? But their purpose is feeding the homeless.
Yeah.
Because they've always enjoyed helping people. Maybe they were a little kid that was sitting in the car and said, Mommy, can I give this guy my banana? And from that day, they developed this love and this passion for helping the homeless, right? Maybe that comes into one day you tore down a toy truck and you realize you like to build things. And maybe you lost your path because you felt like, man, maybe I didn't have the scores of the academics to be engineer, but maybe you can create something, right, that others can engineer, or maybe you can be a part of something. And so it's just really going back to that kid-like experience, man. What did you enjoy doing as a kid? Because think about it, right? You enjoyed talking and helping people for free.
Yeah.
And now you get to do it as a life purpose.
Yeah.
And that's what makes what we do is beautiful, is because I'd never forget, man, the first time I spoke, right, for kids, because a kid that was in my group came to me, a little white kid, I'd never forget it. He was like, Mr. J, you should be a speaker. And I didn't want to have anything to do with speaking, man, when I was in my adult years, because of just like, because of my dad, right? I was just like, man, I don't even want to pick that up because of my memories. And the kid said, no, you should really, he said, man, this kid told me this. He was like, he had to be like 14 years old. He said, Mr. J, when you speak, we listen.
Wow.
He said, you should consider becoming a speaker. And I never forget, man, I spoke at my first graduation program, and it was at a charter school, and they only had 6 kids graduating. And man, I spoke like it was 600 kids out there.
Wow.
Because what I did was, one thing that football taught me is that how you show up is how you prepared. And I always wanted to be prepared, whether it was a handful of kids or if it was a room full of kids. Because the purpose was not about who or who wasn't there. The purpose was to use and to utilize what I have to give them, and to allow them to receive something from me that can be life-changing. They gave me a $25 gift card from Chili's. And I was so happy, man.
Awesome.
I was so happy. So it's like, you know, when people's like, well, man, you get paid this now, but I'm like, yo, I would never forget the bag of candy and the $25 gift card.
Yeah.
And I felt like they gave me $500 because I knew then they value what I had.
Yeah.
And once you start to value what you have, it's not about that people are paying you for it. You begin to use it more because you can see the value in it. Because if you don't see the value in it, others won't see the value. And that's why we get to do what we do, because we identified the value in our gift.
Yeah.
And then we can give it to others.
That is a whole nother episode.
Man, that's
Jay,
a whole nother episode.
Jay,
man.
please tell our audience, our viewers, our listeners how to find you on social media, support everything that you're doing, to check out your books.
Yes.
Tell us.
Yes, so I am on Instagram and Twitter at King J Barnett. And if you are looking to receive coaching, counseling, we have a virtual platform, which is kjbcoaching.com. Again, that is kjbcoaching, initials of King J Barnett coaching.com. Also, be on the lookout. Next Wednesday, I am on A Peace of Mind with Taraji P. Henson, my good friend. Our episode airs on Wednesday. Please be on the lookout. We are helping a generation of men heal, so I'm excited about that.
I love it.
And thank you, Julian, man. This is always good, man.
Always been a pleasure, man. And I'm so blessed to know you.
Yeah.
And I want to give a shout out to Daphne, to Kenneth, to Justin, to Kenna, to S. Perry, to Sherry, to Brett, to Jacqueline R., to Kay Wish, to everyone else on the live stream who's joined us. Of course, thank you to all of our sponsors, Code Up, City Central, Dead Soxy, Focusrite. And as always, make sure to subscribe, comment, and share. Hit that subscribe button here on YouTube. And we'll see you next week on the next episode of The Pathways to Success.